Hey everyone, Rho here. Before we begin today, a huge thank you to a random happy listener for the virtual gift voucher. Huge thank you for the support, my friend, whoever you are. It is truly appreciated, thank you. But with that said, on to today. So with the big rumoured return of Angron at some point this year, today we're going to be asking the question, which Loyalist Primarch would be the best hope to stop him? General spoiler warning to begin, as we will be referencing events from across the Warhammer 40k universe, so you have been warned. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. So the Red Angel of Nuceria himself, Angron, is rumoured to be getting a model release at some point this year with the arrival of the World Eaters Legion. And as unbelievably excited as I am to see any new Primarch model, honestly I'm even more excited to see the lore situation around it. Just how and when will the demon elevated Chosen of Khorne arrive? What kind of events are going to rock the galaxy? And just how and who will stop him? Now obviously the best hope the Imperium has against any traitor Primarch, but in particular Angron, is obviously Perturabo. He beat Angron down once before, just get the Emperor to send him a message telling him he loves him after all, and problem solved. But okay, more realistically, the only Primarch that the Imperium still has alive and kicking is of course a certain Roboute Guilliman. But can Guilliman truly stand against his brother in single combat? And if not Guilliman, which other brother is the best hope of stopping him? Well, who are the options? Of course we have Guilliman himself, but then we'll also consider the Loyal Primarchs who we believe have a chance of returning someday. So that gives us Lionel Johnson, Rogel Dawn, Leman Russ, Jagatai Khan, Vulcan and Korax. Ferrus Manus is very much dead, and as much as Sanguinius' spirit still remains alive in some manner within the warp, at this time I don't see a physical return, so we'll have to keep him out of the running as well. So we'll run through all the Primarchs and then I'll try my best to pick just one. So let's begin with Guilliman himself. Now Guilliman, as we know, is the master of strategy and planning. There is nothing that escapes his attention, able to assimilate information from countless battlefields all in the same moment, conducting the forces of the Imperium to their best hope of victory. And a key attribute to his success during the Crusade was his ability to conduct the affairs outside the battlefield as well, the far less audacious but equally important administration side of warfare. When the Ultramarines conquered a world, they ensured it was able to contribute to the Imperium at large. It was no mere coincidence that Guilliman's Legion became by far the largest by number, and the 500 Worlds of Ultramar became such an example of the Imperium's goals. So in the larger campaign sense, maybe Guilliman would still offer the greatest chance of victory, particularly against a straightforward foe such as the World Eaters. They aren't exactly renowned for their surprise tactics. But one-on-one with his brother, could he really stand against Angron? Well, Guilliman is a bit of a mixed bag. He may not be heralded amongst the top-tier Primarch fighters by many, but to be fair to him, he does get slept on quite a bit. In the days of the Horus Heresy, we have seen him face off against his brother Lorgar, and he certainly more than held his own. In fact, it was only the arrival of Angron that prevented Guilliman from perhaps taking the victory. And despite ultimately losing that encounter, he did manage to handle the two Primarchs at least for a time. We've also then seen him go against Conrad Kurz in several encounters, though this was often with Lionel Johnson by his side. And according to the lore we currently have, Guilliman will defeat an Alfarius during the events of the Scouring, who I personally believe will prove to be Omegon, so Guilliman is no slouch. Since those days he now possesses his father's sword, which can only boost his prowess in battle. But is it enough? Well, to me, no. We have seen Guilliman struggle against greater demons in his Terran Crusade, and we saw him die at the hands of his brother Fulgrim, and in the final encounter of the Plague Wars, he was fairly easily dispatched by Mortarion. While it feels the power levels of the Demon Primarchs have definitely varied over the years, which can be a bit confusing at times, at the moment it feels to me like they are now being taken as a very real threat, being built back up to being the ultimate enemies of the Imperium. It's definitely going to be an uphill struggle for any loyal Primarch, let alone considering it's Angron, probably the greatest physical force of any traitor Primarch. Rabute may be the best hope in the larger campaign situation, but one-on-one against Angron, to me there's Primarchs who stand a far better chance than him. Considering all the Primarch options we're discussing, I'd probably put Guilliman at the bottom of the list. Next we have Rogel Dawn. Man, if you asked me a couple of years ago, I'd be putting Dawn right alongside Guilliman here. A great strategist, but maybe not the best one-on-one fighter. But man, has the Heresy series changed that perception. We've seen Rogel brutally take out his brother Alfarius in one of the most ice-cold moments going. And then he even went toe-to-toe with Fulgrim in the Siege of Terror, clearly coming out the better. Now admittedly Fulgrim wasn't in his true demon form here, and more interested in taunting his brother than fighting him, but still this is a notable fight for Dawn. The only real knock against him I can think of is his beatdown at the hands of Conrad, but this was certainly a surprise assault, so I think we should take that with a grain of salt. And well, considering what we've seen of Dawn so far, which may be a little less than some other Primarchs, it's still enough to say in my mind that he's definitely a better fighter than Guilliman, so you'd expect him to have a better chance against Angron. Now, while I do think he has that better chance, I'm not sure I think he has the best chance out of the brothers we're considering, and to me this really falls down to his style. This is as always nothing but my opinion, and I know many Rogel Dawn fans will disagree with me. But hey, as I always say, that's the great thing about the lore, we all feel differently about it. To me, Rogel has a very straightforward, no-nonsense style, in well all aspects of his personality, but very much so in his fighting style. While that may have benefited him against Alfarius and even Fulgrim, I'm not sure that's what you want against Angron. He's not interested in taunts like Fulgrim. He's not interested in convincing you to see his side of the argument, a la Alfarius. He just wants to fight. And so Dawn's straightforward method is really right up Angron's street. In both of Rogel's victories we've seen, both of his brotherly opponents have been opening their mouths and talking during battle, really playing straight into Rogel's hands. Here, however, against Angron, I think Rogel would be playing into his. His impressive durability at tanking hits is not going to be that helpful against Angron. Yes, Perturabo may have survived it, but Perturabo is far more heavily armoured than Dawn. While Rogel would fare better than Guilliman, and absolutely has to be in consideration due to the feats he has accomplished, I personally don't see him having the best chance, and I'm putting that down merely to the clash of styles. Next we have Vulcan. Ah yes, the Lord of Drakes. Man, what an encounter this would be to watch. The biggest and strongest Primarch going up against the demon elevated Angron. Oh, what a clash of titans this one would be. You know, while Vulcan might not be regarded as the most skillful of Primarchs in battle, his strength alone surely has to put him right up there. I mean, this guy held back when sparring his brothers, because he didn't want to hurt them. I mean, just imagine that for a minute. Vulcan was holding back, because he didn't want to hurt his brother Primarchs. It's pretty crazy to think about. Sure, he'd still be at a disadvantage going against a demon elevated Angron, but I think it's safe to say not as much as his fellow brothers. And the real game changer also comes in him being a perpetual, his ability to come back from otherwise mortal blows. And that's something that could be incredibly frustrating to the now demon Angron. I mean, he was a victim to his rage long before Khorne came along. Vulcan, to me, would be fairly similar in Dawn to his straightforward style. However, Vulcan has the added advantage of not only his strength, but his also being a perpetual. While I think for the most part speed and a more flexible method of warfare may be the better way to go, when it comes to Vulcan, I really don't think you can rule him out. I can imagine Angron becoming more and more frustrated every time Vulcan comes right back. Every time Angron feels he has put him down, only for Vulcan to get back up once again. I guess it all depends on how long that recovery for Vulcan would take. We've seen him recover from being decapitated extremely quickly, but that was when he had really lost his sanity. So I think it is still up for debate. However, the Lord of Drakes for me is a definite contender. Next up we have Lion L. Johnson. Now if we're talking terms of skill with a blade, well then Lion L. Johnson is possibly top of the list. This guy with a blade is a fearsome prospect. We've not seen a great deal of Primarch encounters with him, but we have been blessed with him taking on Conrad. And though both brothers had the better of each other at times, ultimately the Lion was the absolute victor. So that goes down as an impressive tick in the Lion's column. And it's worth mentioning that Curse had become a little more wolfified by this point, despite not embracing the ruinous powers. We've also seen the Lion go against demon princes and defeat the Fate Weaver, Tzeentch's favoured Lord of Change, which, while not up to a demon Primarch standard, are notable victories. So all in all for the Lion, I think perhaps out of all of them, he really lands on just how you feel about him in particular. Just what your perception of him is. For me personally, he has to be within consideration. I probably would feel the Lion has a better chance than Rogel Dawn for example, and brings more skill to the table as a warrior than Vulcan, merely because I feel like the Lion has the ability to adapt his style more so than those two. I also feel like he has the edge in speed. Something that would absolutely be needed when going up against Angron. Now the Lion is regarded as more of a duelist specialist, which again I'm not entirely sure how beneficial that would be when going up against the beast that Angron has become. However, his attributes are undeniable. Next we have Leman of the Russ. The Wolf King. Well, if we're going personal feelings, you know who I'm going to go with. But he does have some notable victories on his record regardless. Of course, the most famous is his win over Magnus the Red, snapping his brother's spine across his knee and a mere fraction away from beheading his brother, before of course the coward Magnus teleported away. Now, my personal favourite victory, however, is his fight against Horus Lupercal. This wasn't just Horus, a Horus Lupercal bandied about as possibly being the greatest Primarch fighter. This was a Chaos elevated Horus. Maybe not the fully embraced one he would go on to be, but undoubtedly one who had begun on that path. And Russ had him beaten. Embedding the Emperor's spear into his brother's torso, Russ could have ended the heresy right then and there. Now, sure, you could say he wouldn't have had him beaten without the Emperor's spear, but the Emperor gave Russ the spear in the first place. It was made and always intended for Russ. He just never really used it much because he didn't like the feeling the weapon gave him. Its benefits are undoubtable. He could, and probably should, use it again if taking on Angron. Similar to the Emperor's sword that Guilliman wields, it could well be the only real way to give a demon Primarch a true death. Now, another advantage to the Wolf King would also be his and his legion's anti-warp properties. The Canis Helix and their runic powers of Fenris have always been good guards against the dangers of chaos. It's one of the main reasons I feel Russ and the Wolves were named the Emperor's Executioners, because the Emperor knew that Russ wouldn't turn. So this again bodes well for any fight against the Demon Primarch. However, I know an argument for many against Russ is the claim that he lost to Angron before his elevation. And while to me it was clearly not a Russ trying to kill his brother, merely him trying to teach his brother to not waste his son's lives, trying to get his brother to open his eyes by having his men surround him, which they did fairly easily by the way, and even Lorgar tried to get Angron to realise he had actually lost. I'll be fair here and say it has to go down as a loss for Russ, and thus a mark against him for the purposes of this criteria. Next, on to Jaghatai Khan. Well, again, we know my love for Jaghatai, probably second behind only the Wolf King himself. This guy is an absolute warrior, probably the quickest and swiftest with his blade of all the Primarchs, which gives him a big advantage when having to face Angron. We've seen him rip the head off a Keeper of Secrets with his bare hands, and go toe to toe with Mortarion amidst the ruins of Prospero. Though this in truth was more of a draw than the Khan victory that is often said. Despite Mortarion's retreat, the Khan was so exhausted he only really had one real strike left. However, with that said, most importantly, spoilers for Warhawk, and even though we know the outcome, the Siege of Terror here, again spoiler, we have seen Jaghatai defeat the Demon Primarch Mortarion after his elevation. And we're not talking Fulgrim getting fed up and walking away here, we're talking a full-on banished to the warp defeat. Now, the particular style in which Jaghatai approached this fight did all but cost him his life, just taking an absolute absurd amount of damage from his brother, which is most certainly not Jaghatai's usual method of war, and not one he would want to use against Angron. However, it does display the versatility of the Khan, and showcase that he will go to whatever length he has to to achieve the win. Regardless of the hows or whys though, the Khan is one of the few Primarchs on this list to have a legit victory over one of their demon brothers, and so he has to be amongst the top candidates. Now finally Corax. Man, honestly, this is possibly the most slept on Primarch for me. So often Corax gets overlooked, all because that one event on Istvan where he retreated from Kurz. It really overshadows the fact that he was absolutely annihilating Lorgar beforehand. I mean just absolutely decimating him with ease before Kurz arrived. And it has to be said that he only fell back because he now had to fight two Primarch brothers in damaged gear. It was cleared up in some of Corax's later novels to show that he didn't retreat through fear of Kurz, as I think does get generally thrown against the poor old Ravenlord. And it has to be said again, in Kurz's Primarch novel, we get a particularly great scene of a standoff between the two, where Corax comes across really well. There is no way that Corax fears Conrad Kurz. Unfortunately for the rest of the heresy, Corax did have very much his own tale, which is a shame as he's another great Primarch. But most importantly, we have seen him since the heresy, and not only have we seen him, we've seen him beating a demon Primarch from pillar to post. Lorgar, now ascended to demonhood, came off as a fairly convincing loser when he came face to face with Corax again, having to run through a portal to escape his brother. Now, a large part of this is the fact that Corax, during his time within the Eye of Terror, has embraced the warp essence inside himself, the power that the Emperor used to create the Primarchs. Let's be clear, he has not embraced chaos, just the warp essence inside himself, and thus, he has powers never seen before. So with this victory, it has to be said, he joins Jagatai and Rogel as the only two Primarchs who have defeated a demon Primarch, though I'm going to be honest and say I count Rogel's as not a true victory compared to the others. Fulgrim's wasn't really a running away such as Lorgar, it was really just him wanting to seek a fight somewhere else. Honestly, depending on the situation, any of them of course have a chance of victory, and I'm going to go with the understanding that the demon Primarchs are going to be built up again as the threats they should be. That their elevation to demonhood means that they are far above a normal Primarch. So this fight against Angron is a truly uphill battle. This won't be the Angron that lost to Perturabo, this will be an Angron at his full potential. Now, while of course I do have personal favour towards Russ, which I openly admit, I really do feel him with the Emperor's Spear is a game changer. However, I'm going to go with the evidence on this and say he is not the best option. I've also got a lot of respect towards the others such as Lion, Rogel and Vulcan, but again in turn they aren't the ones I'm going to be going with. The Lion is a great duelist, but I feel there are other Primarchs who have more evidence in their favour. Rogel, yes, does have the impressive victory against Fulgrim, but it really was cut short by Fulgrim simply deciding to walk away. And again, he was not in his demon form, which really does lessen the victory in my eyes. And as for Vulcan, his perpetual ability means you simply can't rule him out. He would just keep coming back again and again. However, the only real time it appeared to go into overdrive was when he lost his sanity. So I don't really know how effective his healing factor is going to be in this encounter. So unfortunately that rules Vulcan out too. So, given the evidence, I think the main considerations have to be the only two Primarchs who have evidence of beating a Demon Primarch before, which, as we've just said, leaves us with Jaghatai and Corax, which is kind of nice in a way, the two unknown outsider Primarchs getting the spotlight that they deserve. Now, in ruling this down to one, I think you have to say Corax in this situation. Corax was already a fearsome fighter between the Primarchs, and since those days he's almost undergone an elevation of his own right, meaning the power advantage that Angron would have over all the loyal brothers is far less against Corax. He could quite possibly be fighting him on even footing, and that would be a big surprise to Angron. Not only that, the abilities that Corax is now blessed with, being able to melt into the shadows, dispersing into a flock of crows, amongst ones which we may not yet have seen, really could mean that Corax could frustrate and infuriate Angron to no end, leading him to being more rash than he already is. No, Corax didn't kill Lorgar, but I think it's pretty clear he would have. Lorgar pretty much had to run like a scolded child, and this isn't the Lorgar of the Great Crusade. This is a demon elevated Lorgar, a Lorgar who is far ascended over the Primarch that he was, and Corax was all over him. Yes, Angron is a more fearsome opponent, but we're talking about which Primarch has the best chance. The one that gives the Imperium the best hope. Honestly, given all the evidence, I think you just have to say Corax. But as always guys, what do you think? Which Primarch do you think has the best chance going one-on-one with the demon elevated Angron? To me, they all of course have a chance, and they all have their own advantages. Guilliman of course has the Emperor's sword, and would have strategy on his side in the larger context. The Lion is perhaps the greatest duelist out of any of them. Rogel has his undeniable durability and cold calculating mind. Jaghatai has his unrelenting speed, and Russ has his cunning and ferocity, matched with the Emperor's spear. And then of course we have Corax. As always guys, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.